Hello, Grayson and Addison. Today we are going to be doing part 2 of your video lesson series while you're on vacation. Hope you're having a good time. And I got work for you when you come back. So, in the last video lesson, we talked about switching between chords. We spoke about the C major chord, which we have first finger, first fret on the B string, and then we have second finger, second fret on the D string, and then we have third finger, third fret on the A string, and then everything else is open. Very common chord on guitar. Then the next chord we talked about is G7, which is similar shape, except now the first finger is on the high E string, first fret. Second finger is on the low A string, second fret, and then the third finger is on the low E string, third fret. A nice G7 chord like that. And we talked about switching between the C chord and the G7 and getting comfortable doing this, which will allow you to play a surprising amount of music. And then we added a D major chord, which kind of really shook things up. It's a different shape. Interesting things about this chord is now you're playing multiple notes on the same fret, because we have the first and second finger both on the second fret of the G string and the high E string, and then our third finger is on the third fret for the B string. It's also an interesting chord because you really only play the top 4 strings, being D, G, B, and E. You don't play the bottom 2. So we're going to be adding some new chords to this cycle, we'll say. I think the first chord we're going to do, it's relatively easy, is a nice E minor chord. So in order to play E minor, you're going to... Ooh, the wind is about to knock over my music. So, in order to play E minor, what you do is you take your first and second finger, put them both on the second fret of the A string and the D string. Like so. And that's it. So that will give you open E, second fret B on the A string, second fret E on the D string, and then G, which is the minor third, and then B, and then E. So, that's a very common chord as well. So we have E minor now. Now we're going to add E major, which is very similar. You still have 2 fingers on the second fret, A string and D string, but now on the G string, you're adding first finger, first fret, which will change the G to a G sharp, which would make it a major chord. So E minor, and now you put your first finger down on the G string, first fret, E major. So the first exercise we're going to do is figure out how to play those 2 chords, and then we're going to switch back and forth between them. So what you can do is play each chord for 4 beats nice and slow, and then switching between them. So we'll play E minor first. I'll keep my fingers raised. Don't actually do this, I just want to show you what fingers you're using. So here's E minor for 4 beats, then E major for 4 beats. E minor, E major, E minor, E major, E minor, E major. Okay, so now that we have that down, what we are going to do is try to add those chords in the same rotation of the chords we already know. So a C chord going to an E minor chord. back to a C chord, E minor, C chord, and switching between these two chords is really important. They actually share a lot of the same notes, and this is talking theory, but a C major chord is C, E, and G. But an E minor chord is E, G, B. So very similar. It's kind of, if you just stack the two of them on top of each other, you can get a different chord. Anyway, switching between C and E minor is really important as a guitar player. You'll find it in a lot of music. So C, E minor, C, E minor. And another thing you can do is switching between E major and C major. So we have this E major, switch to a C chord, E major, C major. So that's all well and good. Now let's try adding some more chords in the rotation. We're going to do a C chord to an E minor chord to a G7 chord back to a C chord. This is a pretty common progression. You're going to need to know how to do this. So here's a C chord, E minor's coming up, and then G7, back to C. And if you can play this, you'll notice, hey, this kind of sounds like a song. It's because these are the chords of music. So we go C, follow it up with E minor, and then G7, back to C. C major, E minor, G7, back to C. And that is plenty to practice for the week. I would try to do different strumming patterns as well. These quarter note downstrokes is cool, but you can be a bit more creative. Like the most common strumming pattern that I've ever heard is dunk, dunk, gung, gun, dunk, gun, dung, dunk, gung. Down, down, up, down, 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 up, down, down. Here, and then the next will be G7. Okay, so that's going to be it for this week's lesson. And I will see you next week in person. Have a great day. Bye-bye.